then. Also, all of the videos for EmberConf will go up online at some point. The event won't be live streamed, but I'm sure there'll be lots of good stuff on Twitter during it as well. So March 11th for the next Hacker Hours, we have started running a experimental weekly, totally unstructured hack and drop. What do we call it? Drop in and hack, I think we're calling it, roughly on Tuesday nights at a co-working space here in kind of Upper Chelsea. And then the next event like this is going to be March 26th. So that's going to also go up for RSVPs shortly. And I'm looking for talks for that event. In fact, one of my speakers for March 26th is here. Awesome. But if you're interested in presenting, please get in touch. Don't be shy. It's a lot of fun and great experience. So before we get into the main event for tonight, I want to take a minute to thank our sponsors. And first and foremost is our host here, who has been an incredible sponsor of Ember NYC for over 2 years now. And here to tell you a little bit about Pivotal Labs is Christine.
Good evening, everyone. I know you all are anxious to get started, so I'll only take about 15 seconds of your time, so someone start timing me now. As he mentioned, my name is Christine, and I just want to tell you a little bit about Pivotal Labs. We are a leading provider of mobile and web solutions, building highly scalable mobile and web software that reaches across a variety of industry verticals. We work with an amazing blend of Fortune 1000 companies and startups. Our clients span across different industries, and we've been around for over 20 years. I want to also let you know that we are hiring, so if you are interested in employment, you can check out our career website, and I also have business cards to share with you. Have a good evening.
Awesome, thank you. I know a lot of pivots, people who have worked here at Pivotal or still do, and it's a really great organization, great place to learn, a lot of dedication to agile practices here. So definitely think about that. Our other sponsors that I want to say thank you to are Movable Ink, who I already mentioned, and we're going to hear one of our speakers tonight is from Movable Ink, whose hosts our Hacker Hours once a month, as well as Simple Reach, who also hosts once a month Hacker Hours. They've both been fantastic supporters of the meetup. And then finally, my company kind of sponsors the administrative portion of the meetup, and that is Yap. Wore the t-shirt, but forgot to take off the sweater. There we go. Thanks. So Yap is a software platform where consumers, anybody can create mobile applications. That's one side of the business, and the other side of the business we call Yap Labs, and that's Ember Consulting and Training. So if either of those are interesting, please chat with me. So we're going to now get into the main event for tonight. We've got 4 lightning talks and 1 full-length talk. They all look fantastic. I'm really excited to hear them. But before we do, I want to just open up the floor to any announcements that any of you have. So this could be you're hiring, could be you're looking to get hired, could be that you're running an event that would be interesting to the people who are here tonight. Any announcements from the floor?
Hi, my name is Marcus. I'm a co-founder of a group travel startup. We've been around for a couple years, but have recently switched our front end over to Ember. So I'm excited to learn what we have to offer here. We also do have a front-end position, front-end developer position open for an Ember developer. So if you're interested, I'd love to chat after the meetup.
Cool, good stuff. Anybody else for announcements? John, why don't you come up and plug in? Since we last got together, we've had the announcement of Ember 1.10, and the 1.11 beta series has started. We've had the announcement of Ember Data, 1.0 beta 15, and we've had probably about 10 releases of Ember CLI. Oh, an announcement from Matt.
Howdy, Matt Beal. I wanted to call out that Corey and I have been doing a bunch of work on Emblem. with a sponsorship from Vesterly. So we're about to have Emblem like fixed up for 110 and HTML bars, which a lot of people have been waiting for. We hope that we'll have it published tomorrow so that you can use it in add-ons and it'll just be a smooth process. So if you want to make time tomorrow, if you're already using Emblem, you can be using 110.
Awesome. I don't. All right, good. Cool. So speaking of Vesterly, who sponsored that Emblem work, our first speaker tonight is my friend Jonathan Dayton from Vesterly, who's going to talk to us about a add-on that he recently released called Ember-Tour.
Great. Just use this microphone. I'll do handheld. All right. Yeah, I'm going to speak a little bit about a new Ember add-on, Ember CLI add-on. It's on GitHub. It's also, you can npm install it, so pretty excited about it. As Luke mentioned, I'm with Vesterly. We're hiring, so I didn't want to take up the announcement time, but if you are looking for a front-end job, we have also got a DevOps position open, so we're growing and growing fast, so pretty excited about that. I'm going to just go through a little bit of our add-on that we made, and I'll just give a quick demo, but then I really want to get into why we decided to build something new rather than go with things that are already out there, because there are a lot of site tour, there's a lot of site tour software and a lot of open source available out there, but we thought that it didn't quite fit our needs. And just to talk a little bit about some of the issues we face, go through a little bit of the code, and then some of the next steps. It's still a work in progress, and pull requests are welcome. So this is our site, and we have a content management system and some publishing abilities, but we wanted to be able to run people through the app. So I'm just going to show really quickly how this works. Basically, it has a pop-up. The option that we haven't enabled doesn't highlight the element that you're on, but it does have that option. We just have it disabled on our site. But basically, you can navigate around the site. It'll intelligently kind of figure out where it is and what it should be pointing at. You can kind of skip through the tour using the navigation here. And so it'll just kind of navigate around the site. So we had a few requirements that were a little bit unique, and we are an Ember application. So it had to be, that was the first requirement, is that it had to work with Ember. And we wanted to be able to go between different Ember routes and not have to just show the elements that are on one route, but be able to navigate throughout the app, do an end-to-end tour through our whole app. And we wanted to be able to have non-engineers, so our business team, to be able to go in and add different tour steps if they wanted to be able to show off new features. We didn't want to have to task an engineer on it every time they wanted a copy change. So that was one of the things that we were looking at. And we also have a very customizable app. So some of the features are available to some users, and those get turned on and off on a per user basis based on their subscription and their company and that kind of thing. And so we wanted to be able to make it so that the tour doesn't crash because it can't find the next element that's supposed to be in the tour. Some of the things that we thought would be nice would be to load the tour from the database, because we have different environments. We run on different servers. We white label our app for some people. So we want to be able to have very customizable text in different environments. Some tours actually duplicate DOM elements, so they actually copy them out and kind of stick them over the top of the tour. We didn't really want it. That seems just really messy, and we didn't want to have to do that. We wanted to be able to, as I showed you before, kind of be able to click through the tour, go back a few steps if you wanted very easily, so very easy navigation. And then we also wanted to be able to have the tour kind of figure out where it is in the app and start from there, so that it doesn't, every time the user clicks on the Start the Tour button, it doesn't just take them to some arbitrary point in the app. And of course, we didn't want it to be very heavy, which some of the tour tour options out there tend to be quite heavy. And we weren't concerned about support for non-modern browsers, which is one of the reasons why some of the things out there tend to be heavy. A lot of polyfills and ways of getting around issues with IE6 and such that we weren't really concerned about. So the way that it's structured is that there's some stuff that you get by default that's in the app folder, and others that you can include if you so desire. Basically, what you get if you just do an npm install on it is you get the tour model, which has the overall tour options, things like the turn on the spotlight, for example. Tour stop model, which has the individual elements and steps on the tour routes, kind of navigates to where you are in any particular stop. And then we have the Ember-Tour, which is the main component that you drop in, and then the tour stop, which is another component that kind of lives inside the Ember-Tour component. So a couple nested components. And then we have a tour route mix-in that makes it really easy to load load tours from routes. I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but we also have really nice styling, I think, so it's up for grabs. So it's pretty easy if you're using the mix-in. You just drop in the component into the application template, and then just make sure that there's an element with the action attached so that there's something to actually start it, or you could start it as an action from a controller or a route. A couple of the issues that we were coming across when we were building is first of all, what if you have an element that you want to show that isn't in the DOM? So you have something that's on another route, you go there, it hasn't fully rendered, but you want to be able to kind of wait for it. So, and related to that is what happens if it never shows up? And this is mostly because we have a feature turned on or off for a given user. So this is kind of, we have a few things, but this is kind of the core of it. We have a recursive function that basically when it kicks off and transitions to a route, and then it every 20 milliseconds it's checking to see if it can find the element again, and if it can, it transitions and shows the tooltip for that step on the tour. One of the things that we thought would be really great to do is to contextually set the tour so that it would start, as I mentioned before, so that it doesn't just start arbitrarily in some point in the app, but it starts where you're at. And so we wanted to be able to have specifically, like if you're on a user page or a post page, you may want to have completely different tours that start off from those pages. One may go through the whole app, the other one may cover 1 or 2 pages, but we wanted to have our business team be able to do that. And so what we do is we basically take the route you're on and navigate up through the names of the routes, and it looks for the first tour that it can find with that name, and if it finds it, it uses it. If it goes all the way up and can't find it, then it just uses the default tour. So if you had kind of a deep route, it would start at the very lowest level and navigate up and try to figure out where the first tour is that it can find. Another thing that we ran into is that if we have the spotlight function off so that the user can kind of click around while there's still the tooltip that's popped up telling them about the app. But if that's the case, how do we tell now if they have navigated away from the page and suddenly there's this kind of like pop-up tooltip that's pointing at nothing? So this became especially a problem because we were doing navigation, and we wanted to kind of differentiate between whether we were doing the navigation or whether the user had done it. And so we set a transitioning, just this transitioning state. If it is transitioning, then, well, if it's not transitioning, then we figure that the user has initiated the transition, and then we just exit the tour. So we figured that they kind of got bored of it and want to do their own thing. Some things, the next development steps. Right now, the tours are, you kind of have to use a REST adapter, and we want to make it so that you can load it locally. I'm working on an adapter right now. I was hoping to have it done for tonight, but it's not quite done. So the idea is that you'll have a JSON file, and you can just dump in all of your tours and your tour stops and be able to just edit straight from the file. One thing that, another thing, we still don't have terrific handling of show routes. It's something that we're in development on. And then we have a small dependency on Bootstrap, and it's just for a couple of styling elements, and so we'd like to get rid of that. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Why don't you hold on to that?
Okay.
You said you wanted to make it easy for non-developers to update the content. How do they do that?
So we built just a quick API interface. So they just, we have an admin app, and we just added a quick route and some very basic UI for them to go in and edit the different elements. So it's just text-based.
Cool. Do you guys do any functionality to kind of keep track of where a user is on a tour, or if they've seen a tour before, or is it kind of an opt-in thing?
Yeah, we haven't done that yet. That's definitely on the horizon, but that's something we'd like to do. But yeah, we're kind of in the process of working with our onboarding tracking, but
Cool.
it's definitely lends itself to that.
Awesome. All right, cool. Oh, more question.
You said that you keep track of which page it's going to be on, but how do you know where it's going to point in the config? Because I saw that when you showed the demo, it pointed to several different locations.
Yeah, so it has, there are a couple of different fields and a couple different attributes on each tour stop. One is the route that it's supposed to be on, and the other one is the jQuery selector. So using jQuery selector.
Set up, just by show of hands, we get a sense of who's here. Who has never built anything in Ember yet? Cool. All right. And who's been working with Ember for a year or more? Okay. 2 years or more? Anybody 3 years or more? Oh, yeah. Anybody know how long Ember's been around? Handheld good too? Yeah. Take that one. All right, our next speaker, who's just getting set up here, is an engineer over at our friends Plyfe, and he's going to talk to us tonight about his work with a library that another of our attendees here created. So this should be fun. Let's hear it for David Kerr.
Hello, everybody. As Luke mentioned, I'm going to be talking about feature flags for Ember CLI applications. I'm Dave Kerr. I'm a software developer at Plyfe, and I'm a relatively recent convert to Ember and Ember CLI. So let me just start with going over what the basics of feature flags are. So feature flags let you rapidly turn on or off features in your application without adding too much extra code. So why would you want to do this? Primary reason, you want to decouple feature releases and code deployment. We like to develop new features and not have to worry about it being released into the wild to users that should not be seeing this feature yet. Which is also why feature flags are also called feature toggles. In the case that I used them this week, we were looking for the features to be available in different environments. Specifically, we wanted a new user sign-up feature in development and staging, but not in production. But you could also use these feature flags for different access levels, like the previous speaker was mentioning. Use case. We have a CMS for Plife. Just a quick overview of Plife is we are making basically a CMS that lets users create interactive cards. So these interactive cards are polls, personality quizzes, trivia, et cetera. And each one of these cards are actually individual Ember CLI applications. And so is the CMS. So originally we just had our customers, we would set them up with their own account, and then they would log in. But we're now adding the ability to sign up on your own. But it's not quite ready for production at this point. So we want to vary the availability of sign up by environment. The first approach I had was to check the environments of the Ember application. And I knew I wanted to be able to inject everywhere whether or not a specific feature was available, depending on the environment. This is where I stumbled upon the Ember Feature Flags add-on by Katie Gengler, who is here, correct? Oh, thank you. So you can correct me if I am using this the wrong way. So yeah, the basic usage I have for this add-on was that it injects a feature property into all the routes, controllers, components, and views. So here in the environment file, you can actually just add features property to your app. And here I have just new user sign up and set it to true. Alternatively, you could, if you didn't want to do it right at app initialization, you could, in your controllers, you could actually just use the features.setup and then set your feature availability at that point. For environment specific, here I just put in the development block or the production block, toggle it to true or false. And when you get to the template, now you can access the features property. Here I just have a check. If the features new user sign up is true, you will be displaying the link to that section. Alternatively, after app initialization, you could also use the add-ons API to enable or disable on the fly. The other great thing about the add-on is there's a bunch of test helpers. So when you're running your tests, you could use, for example, with feature, and that will toggle the feature back on so you can test it. So the original route I had gone was just to use the Ember environment to add or hide or show the feature. In our case, we're also serving the Ember app via Rails, and we wanted to toggle the features from the Rails environment. So the way we do this is when we're serving the Rails application, we're adding meta tags to the document with the environment from Rails. And I moved the logic that I had in the environment file into an initializer. So when the app is being fired up, it'll read the meta tag, find out the environment, and then do that same logic to turn on and turn off features. And that's pretty much it.
Questions about feature flags? All right, cool. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Next up, Philip, you can come plug in. That also, by the way, you never would know it, but that was Dave's first professional software development presentation. So good job, man. So our next speaker is I can hold the mic for you while I get that. There we go. Oh yeah, let me get to that. Our next speaker is not from New York. Is it Toronto? Where are you from? No, the Netherlands. I was close. But despite him being so far away, there's a very good likelihood that you are familiar with his work. Because our friend who loves NYC is the man behind Ember-Watch, which is one of the best resources, collection of resources on Ember that's out there, constantly updated. And he's going to tell us a little bit about what it's like to kind of be in his spot in the Ember community, watching all of the information that's put out there, and sharing his ideas about how you can learn in Ember and how you can stay on top of the rapidly changing world. So with that, I'm happy to introduce Philip Boots.
Okay, thank you. I love Ember.js NYC because, as Luke said, I'm in the Netherlands at the moment. I originally come from Belfast, Northern Ireland, but then I was in the northeast of England. And what you notice when you're far, far away is that you don't necessarily have access to the same kind of meetups, the same kind of information, the same kind of people who are at the very center of the Ember.js community. So the reason I love Ember.js NYC so much is because of the video guy back there. I want us all to give him a round of applause. I think there's over 750 subscribers, over 45,000 views on the Ember.js NYC YouTube channel. A lot of those are probably me, but I'm sure there are a lot of other people out there who appreciate the fact that a lot of the Ember knowledge that's shared here goes out to the wider community, so thank you, and thanks for having me as well. So as Luke said, my name's Philip Poots. I go on Twitter at PootsBook. I actually, thanks again to Katie Gengler, consult for a company here in NYC for funding gets. I'm a Rails and Ember.js developer. And I'm also the person behind Ember-Watch, Ember-Watch.com, and also the Twitter account Ember-Watch, keeping watch on the Ember.js community. I want a show of hands. Who follows the Twitter account? Who has heard of Ember-Watch before? Who has appreciated the fact that resources are in one place? Thank you. But the reason that so this is the website and this is the Twitter account, and the reason I started with Ember-Watch, I think it was around kind of the 0.9 areas of Ember when I started to get into Ember.js, and I found a lot of the similarities when trying to pick up Ember that I'd already experienced when I was trying to pick up Rails. There was a very fast changing technology. There wasn't a lot of up-to-date information out there. Things were changing almost daily. And it was really difficult to get the right information at the right time, to get stuff that wasn't out of date, to get stuff that hadn't been changed so that you weren't pulling your hair out because something had changed yesterday, the day before, or a week ago, or a month ago. And really it's Peter Cooper's work for Ruby Inside, Rails Inside, Ruby Flow, and also Ruby Weekly that kind of gave me the motivation to, it was actually purely for myself. It was like any time that I saw new stuff on Ember, I would put it on the website. So then when I had the time to, study up or to watch videos or whatever, I had a place where I could come. And thankfully, it was useful also for other people. And the goal was towards a definitive, community-driven, curated collection of Ember.js resources. And to be honest, I've failed in many ways to live up to those goals because it's not necessarily community driven. I'm the person who updates it all the time. And the curated aspect has fallen by the wayside as resources have increased. It's been harder and harder to kind of figure out what is the good stuff and what should I highlight. And part of the difficulty, and part of the reason is just because of there was an explosion of information, and it's still continuing today. There are more and more, I think, blogs, videos, articles being released. Now there are lots more ebooks. There are, people, just today there was a Rails to Ember guide that's been started with tips on how. Okay, great. Absolutely beautiful, love it, and I'm really excited to see where it goes. And so Ember-Watch was, in the very beginning, Ember-Watch, it was the watching aspect, it was basically the catalog of videos for all the Ember.js stuff. And I chose videos because that was like a very high bandwidth, very up-to-date resource, and in the beginning, very much the core team members, that was the only way of getting the information from them aside from actually reading all the code they were writing on a daily basis. And it was a rapidly changing environment. You know, we had a lot of release cycles before one, and even after one, you know, with the release cycle that they're on, you know, the changes are absolutely fantastic, and it's, you know, sometimes it's hard to keep up. And then it kind of expanded into screencasts, podcasts, courses, articles, books. And the way I did this was basically it was a Jekyll site and a data folder with a YAML file, and that's how it still is. And really that's, you know, led to a place which is not in keeping with the Ember community because they go for stability without stagnation. But if I'm honest, like over the past 6 months or so, the resources and Emberwatch itself has kind of stagnated a little bit simply because, you know, I don't have the time to devote to constantly updating with the wealth of new information. You know, in the last 6 months, you know, I've moved from the UK to the Netherlands. I took on a consulting project with funding gates here. You know, I have 2 young children. You know, I can make all the excuses in the world, but the reality is one person can't do it all. So it's stagnated a little bit. So I find it fantastic that there are other people in the Ember community who have kind of done a lot to help other people. So I want to highlight Ember Sherpa, who I think does a great job on Twitter. Is he here tonight? Yeah. And it's great to see the interactions on Twitter. There are people out there who are willing to get involved in helping people getting started with Ember. And that's what makes the Ember.js community so great, because it is a community. And, you know, let's be honest, for some people, the Ember.js learning curve is incredibly difficult at the start. And it's difficult to get over the first hurdle without having someone there to hold your hand and to lead you along the way. Also, someone who contributed a bit to Emberwatch in the beginning was Ugus Ozils. He's got a project called Emberflare, emberflare.com. It's a bit like Ruby inside, just a list of Ember.js resources. Please check it out and please submit stuff there. Often I go there to decide what to put on Emberwatch. And obviously also Ember Weekly by Owen. You can follow him on Twitter, Ember Weekly, and sign up for the newsletter as well. It's a fantastic weekly resource, meaning that you don't suffer from this. You know, because there's so much information coming at you, and I've kind of identified these sources as where I would look and where I do look for changes and things that are happening in the Ember.js community. And number one, obviously, you know, Ember.js is code, and that code lives on GitHub. It's all open source. There are a lot of things happening now. There are a lot of projects. There's the Ember.js official project, but it's made up of separate libraries. There's Ember CLI. There's the full add-on ecosystem. So there's just so much going on. It's really hard to keep track. Twitter as well is a good opportunity. You know, the hashtags Ember.js, Ember CLI, Ember Data, and also following, obviously, the core team members, following Ember Sherpa, following other people who tweet a lot about Ember.js, following the Ember.js NYC account. YouTube, subscribe to all the meetup RSS feeds on YouTube. You'll get all the latest videos. A lot of them do host there. And then blogs and articles is a harder one to kind of manage, but you know, I find on Twitter a lot of the good stuff always rises to the top. But there's always stuff as well that is good but doesn't necessarily make it to the top, and I guess that's the job of a news aggregator, is to find that stuff and to elevate it. So in many ways, you know, I'm back to the drawing board because I can't really continue in the Jekyll stuff. And you know, I got thinking about why I started Emberwatch and, you know, why I did it. And part of the reason that, you know, it's so hard to keep updating stuff, you know, as with people who contribute to open source in their spare time, it's your spare time and you're not necessarily getting paid to do it. So I was just thinking about these things, and I was thinking, you know, wouldn't it be great if I could get paid to contribute to open source, to write blog posts and tutorials, and to help others by teaching, mentoring, gathering stuff. And this is probably, you know, this is probably a desire that a lot of developers or programmers have. But I was thinking about this, and I was thinking it would be great if I could do this. But it got me thinking. You know, I read a book called, well, you probably have all heard of it, The 4-Hour Work Week. And you know, one of the biggest things in the 4-Hour Work Week is basically boil down your goals. And one of the kind of penny drop moments was that I don't have to do all of this myself. You know, I can get other people to help me, or even better, you know. Jesus said, do to others whatever you would like them to do to you. You know, this is the essence of all that is taught in the law and the prophets. You know, why not? And there was also another inspiration as well. James Gullick, he wrote 2 blog posts that, you know, I really identified with. The first one was Rails services. The second one he wrote about women in open source. You know, how it's difficult for anyone to get into open source, but more so for a woman because it's quite an intimidating atmosphere to enter. And, you know, the late James Gullick, there was a grant for women in computology started in his honor to help women get into open source. And I didn't contribute to that. However, I did decide to sponsor a friend of mine and someone I used to work with, Kerry, to basically do those things, write blog posts and tutorials, contribute to open source, and help others by teaching. I mean, she's been working for a month now. She released Broccoli plugins, which is a port of Ember add-ons for Broccoli plugins. She released Ember Deploy S3 Index, which is an adapter for the Ember Deploy library to help you deploy stuff to S3. She's written 4 or 5 blog posts on Ember.js deployment, and hopefully she'll continue to do a lot more. And it's great to see, you know, I'm not the one who's doing this stuff, but it's great to be able to enable others to do that stuff. And hopefully, you know, we will see, as Ember is approaching 2, hopefully we'll also see an Ember Watch 2, which should hopefully be a better way of, well, a better way for me and for others and for you, the community, to contribute to that kind of resource, and also a better way to consume the stuff, to know what is the best stuff to do, to read, what is the best stuff to look at, who are the best people to follow, etc., etc. So, thank you very much for having me. That was Ember Watch and me. I'm going to EmberConf next week, so hopefully I'll see some of you there. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip, for your contribution to the community. It's really, I can't even think of how many times I've gone to Ember Watch to figure out what's new and learn something new about Ember. So thank you. Do we have any questions for Philip?
Hi, Philip. So that was really great, inspirational. It seems like you have an embedded question or an ask for the community from that, which is, you know, do you want people to help you out? Is that something that you're reaching out to?
I think in time, yes, but I mean, with many projects, I guess you've got to set the direction, set the target, and then, you know, help others to contribute to that. I guess, you know, my kind of vision for a better Ember would be an Ember app that helps people submit stuff. You know, I'm not necessarily looking, I mean, if people are interested, absolutely get in touch with me to help me out. But, you know, I'm not, you know, I understand the burden of time that it places on someone, so I'm not, you know, I don't want to just expect people to come and help me out, if that answers your question.
Got a couple of more questions in the back.
So I noticed you didn't mention it, but one of the best resources that I've used is the Ember dashboard, which actually watches commits to Ember as well as the Twitter feeds.
Sure. Great. Yeah, that's also a fantastic resource. And in fact, I sometimes use that as well.
I keep trying to place the accent. Where are you from?
So
It's obviously not the Netherlands because...
No. I'm originally from Belfast in Northern Ireland. That's where I grew up. And then I spent 4 years in Scotland, and then 6 or 7 years in England, and now I'm in the Netherlands.
I'm really interested to see how this works out, because I think that the storyline that you shared of, man, it would be great if I could get paid to, you know, do open source and contribute to the community. So as my solution, I'm going to pay somebody else to contribute to open source. That'll be really interesting to see how this evolves. It's cool. All right, let's give it up for Philip. While our next speaker gets set up, I have an ask for you. I am in the last stages of finishing up the talk that I'm preparing for EmberConf. It's about deploying Ember apps. And so what I would love for you folks who have Ember apps in production here, if I haven't already talked to you about this, to find me over the course of the evening at some point. It can be, we're going to take a break after our next speaker before our main talk, so it can be then or it can be at the bar after. But come up and tell me how you deploy your app. Okay? Thanks. So our next speaker, I talked about the event we're running at Movable Inc. on March 11th. Our next speaker is the CTO and co-founder of Movable Inc. He's going to talk to us about building graphical editors with Ember. Really happy to introduce to you my friend Michael Nutt.
Thanks, Luke. Does this work? Great. Okay. Yes, so I work for Movable Inc. We've been using Ember since the pre-1.0 days. It's been quite a while. We use it for a lot of different things. What we've found is Ember works great for generating dynamic HTML. It works really great for single-page web apps, but kind of as a lot of these desktop apps kind of move onto the web, I just wanted to walk you through kind of our thought process as we worked on kind of a more graphical application with Ember. So imagine that you wanted to build Photoshop, but on the web. Photoshop is enormously complex, but if we were just to take a very small bite off of that, one of the things that Photoshop does is it's got this concept of just like moving an object around, resizing, that sort of thing. That's called free transform. I will just show you right now. So you've got a box here, you can click it, you can move it around. That's free transform. This is an Ember app with just a property called model on the controller. This box has a left top width and height on it. As you can see, as you move it around, the left and top aspects change. That's like the most simple example, and then we're going to walk through some more complex ones. This is a brand new Ember 1.11 app. We're using the HTML bars. It's really, really nice. There's some really nice stuff there. One other resource that I found really helpful is the Ember RFCs. Just reading through those and kind of figuring out where Ember is going, it's been really great. So we've got this model here. If it was just this, it would actually probably be better to pass in the width and height and top and left. But you'll see in a second why we don't. But so this model is a component. The component, we're actually, you might be familiar with an object proxy. What we're actually doing when we look at this right here and we're moving it around, notice as I drag it around, it's not actually changing the controller model. The reason for that, as the actual app is built out, is because there may be a lot of other things that kind of depend on these properties, and you don't want to have to update the entire system, and all that you really care about is dragging it around. Plus, if you're doing undo, you don't want to undo all kinds of drags. You just want the final result. So we go back to here. So we're actually, the component itself has its own top and left properties, which are actually computed from the model plus this delta y and delta x. And these deltas are what are generated. So when you're doing drag and drop, if you're familiar with jQuery at all and that sort of thing, there are 3 events that matter. There's mouse down, mouse move, and mouse up. So we've got each of these. So when you mouse down, we start dragging. As the mouse is moved around, we're actually, when we start dragging, we figure out where the mouse is. And then as we move it, we set this delta x and delta y based on the difference between that. And then when you mouse up, we're going to stop dragging. And then we're actually going to set the model with the computed properties that we made from our components top and left, and then set the component back to 0. So that's like a really simple, just click and drag and move around. So if you wanted to then actually be able to resize the thing, so we've got these corners on it. This probably looks familiar if you've been in Photoshop. You can click and resize, and you can see the width and height changing as well. That's pretty straightforward, except for when you're dragging this corner, notice you're changing the width and height. However, when you're dragging this corner, you're changing width, height, and the x offset and y offset. So here are the corner handles. This is just the components HTML, but we set up these handles. And then when we insert the element, we set up, this is a little bit uglier than it needs to be, than it would otherwise be, just because we actually want to add these events to the overall workspace rather than adding them to the corners themselves. What you might notice back on this thing, if we move really fast, sometimes we actually get lost because the mouse move is actually an event being fired on the object itself. So if the mouse actually gets off of the object, it stops firing that. So here. So here we're just setting up the same kind of thing: on mouse move, on mouse up, and then what I was talking about earlier, if it's for instance, the top property, if it's top left, or sorry, the left property, if it's top left or bottom left, we actually want to inversely change the size as we change the offset to make the object appear to stay in place. So next up, so all of that you could actually do pretty easily with, as you would imagine, there's a jQuery plugin for free transform. I think Luke might have even done a talk on using the jQuery plugin with Ember. It works great. And you might be tempted to use that if that's all that you're doing there. In fact, in my own projects, I use that because I actually thought that Ember was going to be too complicated to build out. But once you get a little bit further along, the next thing that I want to talk about is actually multi-select. And I tried for a long time to get multi-select and a jQuery plugin to work well, but found that it was actually much easier in Ember. So here, you're actually able to select two things and move both of them around at the same time. And that does require a little bit more setup. So what we've actually got here is we've got 3 separate components, and then we've got a container component that goes around the entire thing. So we've built this free transform container, and it's going to control the mouse move, and it's going to receive these drag start and drag end options. And the component is just going to use Ember's send action to send those actions from the individual blocks up to the main part. So you click on a component and you start dragging it, and that component needs to send the start dragging option up to the container. But then it's the container that's actually in charge of making sure that all of the elements move simultaneously. And the other elements that are not being moved are actually, now instead of computing just the model.top plus delta y, we also add in this group delta y, which lets all of the models move simultaneously. And one really nice thing about Ember, with the jQuery plugin, you might notice sometimes you drag it around and not all of the elements would move simultaneously, but the way that Ember's run loop works, all of the properties get resolved simultaneously and everything is very smooth when you drag it. This is actually one thing that I didn't like. If other people have suggestions for how to make this better, I'd love to hear it. But one thing, when you release one of the components, it's actually the container needs to send a message to all of the individual blocks to let them know that the dragging has finished. And this kind of breaks the encapsulation of components. So I'm not totally happy with this, but we do this thing where a component receives its container and then registers an event on the container. So that's not perfect, but so now we've got kind of a pretty good Photoshop-like multi-select drag and drop. One final thing I wanted to show you. One of my favorite parts of Keynote is actually the way that, well, first off, when you've got these elements and you want to select one and then line it up with another, it's really hard to get it exactly there. One really nice thing about Keynote is that you can actually see visually when things line up. So if I click on one, so we're actually showing guidelines, smart guides, to align them. And that actually turned out to be not incredibly challenging to build in Ember, which was really cool. So that consists of 2 steps. When you actually click to start dragging, we want to figure out every single element that's selected as well as all of the unselected elements. For all of those, we want to find all of their edges. So we find the top, the bottom, the left, the right, and then the midpoints in each. And we do that once when you click down, but then when you start moving, on every mouse move, we're going to check to see if you're aligned with another element and then show the guide for it. Those of you, yes? So as you're moving, it's looking at your edges, your left and right edges, and seeing if those coordinates are the same as any of the unselected elements' edges. So as you move it, as those of you who are familiar with big O notation might notice, this is an O of m times n operation. So O of where m is the number of selected elements and n is the number of unselected elements. And this can get pretty slow. Although so there's some algorithms that you can use for finding intersection. I actually found that what we're doing here, as we check for guides, we say, what is our top delta and what is our left delta? How far have we moved from our starting point? And then we go through the midpoints, horizontal, vertical, and the edges, horizontal and vertical. And we check to see if any of them align together. And I would have imagined that this would be really quite new if I select a bunch of them. As you move it around, you see all of these are being computed. So, yeah, and here's what the HTML looks like for the guides. We've just got horizontal guides that we build, and then vertical guides. And yeah, that's it. It's up online. Check it out. Yes.
I was wondering if you had also considered rotation as a movable property?
Yes. Actually, in the actual version that we're using, there is rotation as well. The multi-object rotation gets a little bit challenging because you would expect if you have multiple items selected and you rotate that they all rotate along a common axis. But as you do that, you actually have to, so this is all backed by HTML elements. So you would actually have to create containers around those specific elements. And then selecting other elements and rotating that can get somewhat complicated. But the individual case rotation is actually pretty easy with CSS transforms.
Other questions for Michael?
I'm assuming that you can add components to, like by clicking, you can add a new component, right, into the canvas.
Yeah, in this example, you actually can't. In this example, the model is actually just hard-coded in the controller. But yeah, there's no reason that wouldn't be possible. That's actually how it works in our production app.
And so are you just dynamically rendering those components from the models that you have?
Yeah. So actually in this last slide here, we just go each model as model, render a free transform component.
This is awesome. Did you consider using request animation frame to disconnect the drawing of the canvas from the Ember run loop cycle?
I hadn't, but that would probably speed it up even more. That would probably eliminate a lot of the unnecessary redrawing, especially mouse move, which is particularly taxing because every single pixel you move with the mouse.
And one other thing, is the code for this up with the free transform example, or is it just the demos?
This is the entire, it's actually a branch for each of those examples. But yeah, the entire app is there.
Awesome.
Cool.
It is totally awesome.
Thanks.
I think that you should consider getting a patent on this idea for the military. I think it'd be great for dog fights, for F-18 fighters, that sort of thing. Right?
Will do.
All right. I'm curious, does anybody have an idea off the top of their heads looking at this for the question that Michael asked about getting the kind of finish signal from above the components, above the pre-transformed components? All right. That's your, hold on.
I don't know if this could be a good use for the famous evented mixing. Maybe adding the.
Sorry, what was the question?
It looked like you were using like jQuery events, but if you could use the evented mixing, that you wouldn't need to pass around your component. So,
yeah. So the container component is firing an event that the child component receives. It's just that the coupling there is not quite the way that I would like to see it.
Yeah, with the mixin, maybe you wouldn't need to pass the container into the child element, because you would just use the event name, and then you would subscribe to that event name, and then you fire that from the container, and you would listen to that in the children components, and it'd be a little bit more decoupled.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you.
All right. I think that's it for this one. Let's give a big round of applause for Michael. Thanks for sharing.
Thanks. And Movable Link is hiring, so Ember devs, come talk to me afterwards.
Talk to Michael or to Lee, who I saw here somewhere. There he is. Good people. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to have Taras Ember Sherpa with Ember Table. And then we're going to go for drinks. So stretch, introduce yourself to somebody that you don't know. And we'll be back in a couple of minutes. Thank you very much. So if there's one thing that is common in business applications, it's tables. Grids, spreadsheets, you name it, whatever you want to call it. You will be asked to build it if you're building business apps. So our next speaker is going to tell us about it. He is not a stranger to the Ember NYC stage or to my couch, my living room. But he's a great guy. You probably interact with him on Twitter. If you don't follow him, you should. Ember Sherpa, Taras Minkowski, take it away.
Thank you, Luke. This is actually, that was most of my introduction. Table is something that I've had to deal with. Tables that have a lot of data is something I had to deal with on the last 2 applications that I've been working with. So when I had to do this again for, like the first thing that I did for the latest client was the table. I'm like, I gotta talk about this because I learned a lot the first time and I'd love to share this and I'd like people to be able to start from what I've learned as opposed to having to start from scratch. So this talk is on Ember Table. I'm this character, Ember Sherpa on Twitter. I tweet about things that you might care about Ember stuff. So Ember Table is a component that's created by these wonderful people at addon. They have this on their website, and I'm assuming that's an Ember Table component. I can't really tell, but it looks like it, so I'm guessing that's what it actually is. Ember Table is this, so there's an animation of this, so it basically allows you to show a lot of data in a table format, and you can do a lot of pretty complicated stuff with it. It's pretty elaborate, and so I want to talk about how you would tame this craziness. You could do stuff like this, so you could have animations inside of your tables. So see, there's some of the features. It features not Borat, but it features DOM reuse. So basically, we have DOM reuse allows us to not have to. It allows us to reuse the DOM that is being rendered in the component, and allows us to limit how many DOM elements are actually created. So when you're displaying 10,000 items, you're not actually creating a DOM element for every cell and every table row to represent those 10,000 items. You're only presenting the things that the DOM that's necessary for the user to fill the size of the table, and that's it. And that's what DOM reuse does. Pretty scroll bars, it gives you a consistent way of presenting. It's like basically it allows you to eliminate scroll bars. So if you go back here, it gives you these kind of scroll bars on the side, and those scroll bars are available on every platform, which is nice because then you don't have to worry about what things look like on Windows. You can just write code and it will just work. You can lazy load data, and it works. So there's a lot of examples. So there's like maybe 10, 15 examples. You can go to this website and basically download the examples. One thing you have to be careful or aware of is that you might expect it to be like kind of easy, just take a component or some options and display it. But most likely it's going to be more like this. So you just go around, you copy and paste a bunch of stuff in CoffeeScript, and then you create a bunch of templates, and then you most likely going to not use CoffeeScript, so you're going to convert this thing to JavaScript, and then, so this is kind of an arduous process, but this is going to happen if you end up using the examples. So the Ember Table component is actually pretty complicated. And this is a chart that I wish I had when I started, because first time when I started working with Ember Table, I had to make basically like a Google spreadsheet thing, but in Ember, and it's really like it's a very complicated hierarchy. So you've got this data that's coming in, so you have a bunch of rows that you want to present in this table, and you have columns, which are basically how the data is going to be presented. And all of that is going into a component. And then you have three sections. So you have the header table container and the body container. And there's a footer. Well, I didn't put that in because it doesn't fit in the slide. And that's going to be a kind of consistent theme throughout this talk. It just doesn't fit in the slides, so I'm just going to cut to the things that are kind of important. So this is what, so there's a bunch of container views. Basically, container views is what Ember uses to dynamically render render views. So anytime you see C or container, those are container views that are used to dynamically render cells and columns. There is a separation here, so there's actually two areas. So there is a part, there's a part that is kind of fixed columns on the left, and then there is the actual cells content, and that's why there's separation here into two separate things. So it's actually rendering two blocks side by side, and then it's doing the same thing. So this is the header. It's doing the same thing with body, but you have a lot more rows, and then you have the same thing with the footer. So this is like really an elaborate, like this is really complicated. And I think, what's going on? Great. Technical difficulties. My computer went to sleep. Oh, there we go. Okay, so yeah. So all of this stuff works with the anti-scroll and the resizing functionality to kind of all work together. And all of this is what's necessary to make this table present itself. And I wanted to make this chart so it kind of shows what's involved in creating, well, making this component just show things on the screen. So that under no circumstances would you go, oh, this thing is too complicated because it's like not, maybe it's too complicated by design, or maybe there's a flaw in design. Like, it's actually really complicated. And that's why it is this way. And so, because the next step I'm going to talk about how you'd actually do things in Ember Table, with Ember Table, and some of those things are going to be a little bit arduous, or it gets old a little bit. I'll get into that. So just know it is this way because that's one of the best way, like this is the only way to do this right now. And so let's get into that. So this is what you actually, what you would do is if you want to have a component, a table component presenting data, you would have on your controller, you would define a columns computed property, and you pass those columns into your table component. And these columns tell the component how to present the cells in those columns. Let me see what the next slide is. Yeah, so there's a lot of different options that you could use to actually present. The few things that are really important here is the header cell view and the table cell view. These are the views that are used to display to render the actual header and the actual table cell. So if you want to modify the HTML inside of those cells, you have to override these views. The other thing is if you want to customize how the data is being fetched from your rows into the actual table, you have to use this getCellContent function, and you have to override that in your column definition. It's quite flexible, actually. Yeah, so this is what the process I described. So if you want to have a custom cell, what you'd have to do is you have to create a view class, and then actually first you create a column definition, and then you tell it that you want to use a specific cell class, so table cell view there, and then you create that view by extending from the view, and then you have your actual template, then you customize that template. So this is the process that you would go through if you just wanted to have different HTML inside of that cell. this actually gets, it can get pretty, there's a lot of flexibility built in. And you could do quite a lot of different complicated things with this thing. So like what I'm showing here is a more elaborate example where we have a column data that is being used to generate dynamically these columns that we're going to present in this table. And we are actually, the get cell content is dynamically figuring out what kind of, how it should be presenting the data. So you could actually, in this get cell content, you can actually have, if you wanted to, you can have access to the actual controller. So you could, in theory, if there's some properties in the controller, you could actually use it in get cell content. The only thing, like the way it's set up right now is if you have a property on the controller that dictates how the data is presented in the actual cells, you would need to update rebuild the columns. So you can't just even though you have in this closure in the get cell content, you have access to the controller. If you use a property from the controller, it will not update when that property changes unless you specify that property as a dependency in a property definition. So basically what this means is that whenever a property on the controller changes what's presenting in the table, you're essentially rebuilding that table. But it's only rebuilding the table, part of the table that's visible, so it's not as slow as it could be. But this is basically what happens. This is what the data structure looks like. So you have two options. You could basically have, well, you could do anything you want because you're actually in the get cell content. You are actually customizing how you would getting that data out. But you can format this data as an array of hashes or an array of arrays. If you're using arrays, then you have to use indexes. With hashes, you can specify property names to get the data out from that particular row. All right, so I'm going to talk about use cases. So use cases, I call this part of the talk the punching holes through walls. So one of the common use cases that you might find is that you might want to give the user ability to click on a cell and something happen. So if you want to click on a cell and have something happen, this is what you'd have to do. You'd have to go through the kind of same steps as you would. So you have to basically, so your first goal is you need to tell your component, Ember Table component, what should happen. Now, you would actually, there's a step that's missing because you'd need to extend the actual component. But anyway, so responding to clicks, so you'd have to tell it which action to trigger when that action, which action to trigger on the controller when the action is triggered in the click. Then you have to define your, customize your, create a custom view. And in that view, you trigger the actual action. And then you have to extend the component, and you have to tell it that this new thing is going to be happening. And that's going to trigger the action on the actual controller. So you actually, that's what I mean, you're punching holes through things, because you need to get this action out, and the only way to do it is by extending the component, telling you that action is, and then, yeah. There's another way you can do this. I haven't actually done this in the actual app, but in the process of putting together this presentation, I realized you could probably do this. Like if you have an action that applies to a column, you could actually fire the action. You could set the action handler on the column itself by giving the column definition the action handler, and then you define the action, and then you could basically skip the whole going through the component by triggering the action on the column. So that's one way that you could skip defining another component. Yeah, if you want to do this with rows, it gets really complicated. Yeah. So all of this was to get us to this point. Ember Table is the only way to present a lot of data in a tabular format in Ember right now, in a way that is actually, you could use like a jQuery plugin, like was mentioned earlier, but that doesn't actually work. When you actually start to build complicated, like when your requirements get more complicated than just show something on a screen, you can't use jQuery plugin. You have to use Ember Table. And Ember Table has been around for a long time. So when I made this presentation, Ember Table has been around for more than 800 days. So it's more than 2 years old. It's actually a very old add-on. And it's most likely the most complicated add-on that is available, or most complicated component that has ever been available for Ember. Like, I don't know if there is one that is more elaborate than this. And it's been kind of stagnating. So there is Adapar released it 2.5 years ago, and it's been version like 0.3 for a very long time. And they made plans to upgrade it, and you can see they got to phase 3 and they kind of didn't really get much further. And it's understandable, but there is a wonderful person named Alejandro, Intuitive Pixel, who took it upon himself to rebuild this thing, get rid of CoffeeScript, and actually modernize the whole project and actually make it available as an Ember add-on. And so if you go to, if you want to use this component, just you can install with Ember CLI, Ember Table, and just start using it. So I told you a pretty scary story of how you'd actually work with this component, and I think this is actually a story of components in Ember 1.0, 1.1x basically. We have this hard isolation, hard in the sense that you have to punch holes through walls to get your actions into components. Customization of views customizing templates is really complicated. You have to do this thing through views, firing actions, handling actions by bubbling them doesn't always work. So I'd like to talk about what would this thing be like if it was rewritten for Ember 2.0. For some of the things that we actually are going to be getting when Ember 2.0 hits. And some of the things that I'm talking about are already available today. It's just Ember 2.0 is a good target because it's kind of still ahead. So one of the things that we could have is this, we could have this ability to have built-in templates. So you could have a template that is part of, so this, what I'm showing here is what an Ember Table component might look like in Ember 2.0. The first part here is if template, there's actually a better way of doing this thing. There's a PR that was merged recently that would allow this to be if has block params or something like that. So basically, if it has block params, then skip this whole thing and just yield the properties that we need to the outside context. So basically, the context where the template is being rendered, give it the properties that are necessary and let it take care of it. So what that means is that we actually can just, we can take care of this. We could just put this into our template, and we don't have to extend the component, nothing like that. We just copy and paste this, and then we have like a working component. So with block params, what we get is we get a way to provide values that we can use from the component into the scope here. So this is actually in in some template that you'd be working with. So like it would probably, like at this point, it's bound to, to a controller. But so in this block, you could have columns and rows available to you. And then all you have to do is you just basically in the same way that you would build an HTML component, but you just do it in a modern way. You just take those rows, you would put it into a table body, and then this table body would yield some properties for you, and then you could use those properties to display. So you basically, all of that complexity that I showed in that chart could be abstracted behind this kind of an API. So responding to clicks becomes a lot easier because now you have, this is within the controller, or in the future will be component scope, and so this action is actually being triggered on the scope that this template is bound to. So this is natural. You don't have to do anything to get this working. It's just available to you. Luke, this wonderful person right here, has submitted this pull request that gives us component helper, which we could use to dynamically render components that would be, so instead of the views that we have, we could be using this component helper to actually render the cells. And what that means is that we could customize what components is being rendered simply by specifying the column name in a column definition. So component name in a column definition. This really simplifies things. So one of the things that I want to mention is that this thing is basically as terse as it gets. This is basically writing HTML, but and when we have when we have components that we could use with the HTML brackets, this will basically look like an HTML template with a little bit of extra properties being passed in. I don't think, I wouldn't mind writing this. This is not bad. This is not much worse than what we would have done with plain HTML. So, so this brings me to the end. So basically, if you want to use this, if you want to work with Ember Table now before a new version comes out that's nobody's even working on yet, you could use this Ember CLI Ember Table component by Alejandro. I think Adapar should make it 1.0 and start working on what Ember Table might look like for 2.0. That's it.
All right, questions for Taras?
Okay, so suppose you've already been using Ember Table in its current Adapar form, where the latest release only works in 1.6.1 and the master works in 1.8. How do we get to Ember CLI Ember Table?
I think the upgrade should be pretty easy. It's not, because all the insides are the same. So the only thing that he changed is get rid of CoffeeScript, and we're using the Ember CLI reference to views and templates as opposed to the global scope. So you will have to do some work, but it's not going to be a rewrite. It's just going to be like substituting and just adapting things to what it should be anyway, basically.
Other questions?
Hey there. More just a comment. You gave a good example of how to react to a cell being clicked on, and you mentioned that it's difficult to do the same thing for a row. I've had pretty good success actually just using the selection feature. You can, when you declare your usage of the component, you can bind a property to the selection property, and when you do that, if you click on a row, then whatever object in your your data array, that's going to be the selection. So you can do you can observe that, you can use that as input into a computer property, you can react to that in lots of different ways.
Yeah, the tricky part is trying to respond to the view that's represented by the selection. So that's the part. So like if you wanted to, so the thing that I had to do was you select something and then put a pointer right at that thing. So it's not, so you're not interacting, you're not selecting from the user perspective, you're not, what I need to do is not to not to point at the data, but point at the view that represents that data, and that's the part that gets really complicated.
All right.
Amateur question, but why get rid of CoffeeScript?
It's yeah.
Question was why get rid of CoffeeScript?
It's because you get a lot of the benefits in the 6, and it just makes it a lot easier to not have to think in 2 languages.
What's Addon's buy-in on this idea?
I don't know. Actually, part of the reason why I'm doing this is because I'd like to, like, they were very excited about the fact that I did this talk in Toronto, and this is the previous talk wasn't recorded. This talk is, so I'd like to open a dialogue of of what 2.0 might, like Ember Table 2.0 might look like. I think that's part of the reason why I gave this talk. I'm just going to give a thorough example of what what we have today. So.
Yeah, the API that you proposed looks really nice. It's great. I think a great example of kind of where the newer HTML bars stuff, what the newer HTML stuff is going to enable. And the component helper example is probably like the best use case that I've seen so far in a while. So. Very cool. Let's give it up for Taras. All right. Actually, would you do me a favor and pull up the map bar after? Who remembers what this place is called last month? Crooked something? Crooked Night. Thank you. 14th Street, between 7th and 8th. Excellent. It's got a nice spot in the back that we've been able to use the last couple of months, where it's relatively quiet and easy to have a conversation. The food's surprisingly good for a place like this, and I don't know. I just didn't expect the food to be that good. But anyway, to all of you who are here and to all of our friends at home, thank you for joining us tonight, and we'll see you hopefully at the bar after, and if not, next month. Ciao.